Hey guys, Justin with Deep Dive Stocks here, and today we're going to be doing a data dive into CCJ. So let's go ahead and get started. So CCJ caught my eye, everyone just seems to be talking about it, so I figured I would go ahead and give the report a look, and things looked pretty interesting. So I figured I would make a DD about it and let you guys see what I see. So we're going to be using VoEx as usual. If you haven't, I definitely recommend checking out the videos on my channel about VoEx, just what it does, what it measures, how to interpret it. But it's pretty straightforward. VoEx is the magenta line here. VoEx trend is the golden line here. And if VoEx is above this top horizontal line, it's said to be in the inhibition zone. If VoEx is below the bottom horizontal line, it's said to be in the propagation zone. And both of those mean that the stock is relatively unstable. And so by process of elimination, we typically want VoEx to be well within these two horizontal lines. And that's really where a stock is stable and it's free to do kind of whatever stocks do, which is in 95% of the time, it goes up. So CCJ, as we can see, spends a lot of time mostly in the inhibition zone. A little bit, it dips down a little bit into the propagation zone here. And just a quick aside, typically when a stock's VoEx drops into the propagation zone, it experiences declines in price, which is something that we see here. So if we kind of just map out like all the times that VoEx is in the propagation zone, we see that the stock typically falls. But what's interesting is some stocks kind of have this whatever underlying mechanisms are influencing it, it starts to develop a bit of a cycle. And we see that this cycle is kind of present here on CCJ, where the price starts to rise, VoEx responds pretty drastically, and then spikes down and the price falls. And then the cycle kind of repeats. And you can kind of always time when the local dips in price are going to occur because VoEx starts dipping low pretty substantially, like pretty quickly. And I bring that up because currently we seem to be kind of in this next cycle of sorts. So the price is appreciating. We see that VoEx is rapidly climbing into the inhibition zone. And in fact, today spiked into the inhibition zone. And so just from VoEx, we see that the classic behavior or what we might be able to expect from CCJ is that the price is going to go up, right? And our job, if we're just looking at VoEx to manage our trade on CCJ, is just simply to watch for when VoEx starts to spike back down pretty drastically. And that's going to be an indication to us that we're at like a local peak. So if we map out all these big spikes, maybe a little bit more refinement, right? We see that these are pretty close, if not at the local peaks. And so with VoEx behaving very similar to how it's behaved 1, 2, 3, 4 times in the past 2 years, it seems pretty reasonable to expect a explosion in price. Just keep an eye out for VoEx and ride the wave up until VoEx spikes down. And then you hop off the train for a little bit, if that's what you want. So that's VoEx graph. That's what we can anticipate. Let's look at some of the other aspects of the report and see if they agree with us. The next thing we can look at are the snap graphs. So the snap graphs take VoEx's behavior and kind of, it attempts to remove that like subjective interpretation of it and just boils it down to the raw numbers. And it looks at VoEx behavior over 4 intervals and maps out the way that the price behaves in the next 4 intervals. So we see here we have the 20-day, or that's 20 trading days, so that's 1 month, the 10 trading days, 5 trading days, and then 1 trading day. The snap graphs are relatively straightforward. We simply just have to look to see where the crosshairs are in relation to this gold line. If it's above, then that indicates that the model is suggesting a positive price action. The blue shaded region is the 95% confidence interval for the model itself. And the pink is the raw data points, whatever the snap algorithm produces, just so we can get a feel for how well defined this algorithm is. And we see that positive predictions on the 20 days, so that's 1 month, positive predictions on the 10-day, positive predictions with a really nice like localized 95% confidence interval on the 5-day, and again, positive predictions on the 1 day. So snap graphs agree with our bit of a hand-wavy visual interpretation of VoEx that positive price action is the most likely in this scenario. Then moving on, we can look at the gamma gaining, or that's the newsletter, the gamma hedging heat map. In a very similar fashion, it maps the current local environment for the stock and how the gamma on the stock needs to be hedged as IV and as the price changes. The crosshair indicates where the stock is currently. So we have positive gamma, price is 27, or volatility is 0.6. And so that lands us right about here. And we see that CCJ is inside of some pretty significant selling pressure. I guess it's not significant. I don't really consider it significant until we start getting the numbers. So we do have some selling pressure, but the cool thing is we have a good amount of purchasing support below. So even if the stock starts to fall, almost immediately we start to run into some significant purchasing pressure, and that'll help bounce the stock back up. Now, I'm not necessarily, this is going to be a little hand wavy too, I'm not necessarily surprised that the selling pressure is here. In fact, that's probably some of the information that's being fed into VoEx, and that's indicating that instability. But whatever is occurring on the stock right now, VoEx has also told us that whatever is occurring now seems to have occurred before. Give me a second while I go ahead and learn some English. And then, so it's happened before. We see what the stock typically does before. VoEx is telling us that this is a very similar situation below the surface. So although there's some selling pressure here, it seems like might get a little trumped. Now, if the price rises and the volatility falls significantly, then we might talk, but I have a sneaking suspicion that volatility is going to go up as the price rises. And we can see that that's what happened last time as well. So this this graph is the expected price range graph. So the dashed lines tell us the 68% probability, kind of like price range that a stock moves in. And it's just healthy. It's good to see. It helps you visualize kind of how well behaved a stock is. Does it consistently move more than the market expects, or does it kind of stay nicely inside the channel? And we see that for the most part, CCJ actually stays pretty nicely defined inside of its channel, obviously except for today, which was a pretty significant move. But of note, like we said before, I actually expect that as the price rises, like it did in early April and in March, early April, that volatility is going to rise, just because I have a sneaking suspicion of kind of what's happening in the foundations of this stock. The shorting behavior is relatively benign. We move to the options layouts. On the left, we have the options as they are today. And then on the right, we have the change in the options. The bars indicate the change over from the day prior. And these big squiggly lines represent the daily change over the past month. So for instance, it tells us that the strike price of 19 over the past month has seen on average a 10% increase per day. It doesn't really mean much because the actual open interest of 19 is relatively small, but it does tell us that the general rule of thumb is that there has been a greater increase in calls in the money for the calls than there has been out of the money. And so it'll be cool to see if that evolves as the price rises. The first thing I do notice though is that since we have that positive gamma, these call walls are probably going to start becoming these slight resistance points. I went ahead and looked back in the old data, and this is actually with those VoEx spikes, pretty reminiscent. So back in the day, like by that I mean in last April, this giant call wall was actually located at $25. It struggled a bit to get past that, and now it seems like the call wall has migrated up to $35. So it'll be interesting to see if kind of the same thing plays out even on the option side that's being suggested by VoEx, namely that it's going to move to 35 and then the price is going to readjust. One of the cool things about this too is, like I said, like the delta and gamma are both positive. So that tells us that the predominance of these options are providing long delta. Well, with which options provide long delta? That's dealer long calls and dealer short puts. So that tells us, since we have a vast discrepancy here, we have almost 5 times the amount of calls than puts, that we can assume that the majority of these are dealer long, which means they're retail sold. And these are pretty stabilizing. And that is the reason for this nice purchasing support below us, even though it does unfortunately give us a little bit of selling pressure above. The idea being is that there's not really any resistance to moving up. Although as the price does rise, this selling pressure from this long delta will start to build up. But I don't know if it's going to be that much, right? And if anything, we can just watch VoEx to see if it does become too much. VoEx will probably start spiking, and then we know we can move out. One of the things too is delta has been increasing quite substantially over the past 2 weeks, right? So over the past month, the average delta was negative, but it seems like in the past 2 weeks, the delta has been steadily increasing. So something to take note. It's actually pretty stabilizing. Quite an obscene amount of volume today, almost 3 times the normal amount. I don't see much in the way of shorting. The hedging heat map, or the hedging matrix, so much hedging going on, we see that for every point increase in price and every point increase in volatility, 333 shares have to be sold. And with today's price movement of 8.13 and an increase in volatility of 6.79, this comes to a pretty, well, probably would be a normally significant selling amount of 1.9 million shares that have to be sold under normal conditions. We see that with the current volume today of 20 million, if this continues, then that hedging requirement is substantial and definitely compared to normal, but obviously something else is going on here on the stock. And the cool thing is we don't really need to know what it is. We just need to follow VoEx, right? The expected price range just tells us that's the dashed lines from above, just in tabular form. And so if we do expect a price appreciation to at least 35, we know that if CCJ maintains its reputation as being relatively well behaved, that we can expect that in a little bit over a month, as the upper limit for the stock currently at T plus 20 or 20 trading days is 30.66 or 13.57%. Another thing we can look at is exactly with a little bit more granularity how the options on the stock are being positioned. And what's interesting is we see that the puts are pretty healthy. So the dealer short out of the money puts, so retail investors are purchasing puts, has a pretty nice consistent amount. So this is 16% increase from yesterday, an average increase of 46% per day for the past 5 days, and an average increase of 15% per day for the past 20 days. So consistently increasing, that's nice. The dealer short calls decreased a little bit today, but that's not too shabby. A whole bunch of calls are so about equal amount of short and long closed. Pretty nifty. So in sum, CCJ, right from looking at VoEx, we see that its behavior is pretty reminiscent of the times before when VoEx, you start to get a little price appreciation and VoEx just zooms into the inhibition zone. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with VoEx, this is not like normal, like stable VoEx behavior. Typically, you just want VoEx to kind of like bloop, 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 mosey along. These are pretty rapid ascensions, but we see that historically, whatever's going on CCJ, this is met with continued price appreciation. And typically all we have to do to look for the local top is wait for VoEx to spike back down. And so that's what I think I'll do. I hope this has helped. I hope you enjoyed. The one thing I do want to mention is, before I go, the data dashboard is up. It's live. It's absolutely an alpha version, but it's pretty cool. You can look at any stock. You can look at CCJ, for instance. You can even, if you want, you can change the dates. You can hover over. You can look at the price, the VoEx amount, the date. Or if you want to get a little bit more nitty gritty, you can look at the actual data. So this is the same data we saw today. A little bit, not all of it, right? I'm still working on it, but it's got the snap graphs, the options layouts, and VoEx. I think it's pretty cool. It's open alpha. Eventually it will be member only, but for now, go play with it. Tell me what you like, what you don't like, and send me all that information. And yeah, if you like this channel, like these videos, like, comment, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Let me know that you like them. Let me know what you don't like so I can change it. And I will see you guys next time. Have a good one. Bye.